growing and directing the change in your world. I wouldn't be here if it weren't for the mentors and all the work of all the other chefs that I've had the pleasure of working with throughout the years. So this is me giving back. And quite honestly, 2020 presented me just an amazing opportunity to do that, to be able to work directly with chefs, actually kind of get access to everybody in your home. That's kind of an unexpected positive from 2020. Chef Rogers and I were just talking about. Literally, I think everybody's been forced to open up to different means of communication, and I'm really excited that I can be here today and share with you a topic that's very near and dear to my heart, all about growing and directing the change in your world. So often as chefs, and I think as humans in general, we're often left to the outcomes that are determined for us. We don't necessarily take a whole lot of control over all the variables that we can. And we're in a world that's changing so rapidly right now that no matter what we do, it's going to change. So we may as well change ahead of it or get changed by it. One of my life mottos: high performance chefs aren't born, they're trained. I wasn't born this way. I was born quite humbly. My dad's a fireman. My mom owns a daycare. I just had the wonderful experience of being introduced to food at an early age, and I worked very hard for the last 25 years to become a certified master chef. Throughout the course of the webinar, I have a couple recommendations, little housekeeping items. Focus. Take a little bit of time, pay attention to what we're doing here, take notes. Definitely take notes. I always tell people to take notes like you need to teach this material to someone else. It changes the perspective and the way people tend to take notes. And then use the chat. If you come up with a question or if I'm unclear, please, by all means, type a question into the chat or let me know. Can anybody hear me? Can everybody hear me okay? Thumbs up. Everybody good? Yeah? Okay, cool. I would hate to do a presentation and end up talking to myself, actually, or I don't know, like I had happen late last year, I don't know, present a slideshow where only I saw the slides turning. I would like to avoid that. So that's getting the most from the webinar. No matter how we cut it, the world has changed, and it continues to change at alarming rates. Being good no longer leads to good results, and that's really a hard pill to swallow. Good just simply isn't good enough anymore. The world is moving super fast, and things change at the drop of a hat. No matter what you do, no matter how you cut it, things are changing. There's 3 skills that I think every chef needs and needs to really focus on in 2021. On the fortunate side, I think we all have them and we're all relatively familiar with them. The only problem is maybe you just need a little reminder about them. So let's start with adaptation. Adaptation involves assessing your current situation in the marketplace, being honest about where you are, honestly looking at where you need to be, and adapting to fill that gap. Learning has changed dramatically since early 2000s. Learning continues to change actually at a rapid rate. The rate of information and knowledge that the average human has access to at this day and age is almost infinite. In your pocket, whether you realize it or not, is a device that provides you virtually instant access to 90% of the entire history of mankind. Try and wrap your head around that. There's some studies that were done, and I'm not being I'm not being hyperbolic. That is legitimately accurate numbers. And then, last but not least, is growth. If you're not growing, you're dying. Plain and simple. Tony Robbins says that the primary key to happiness, year after year, is to raise your standard. In the fast-paced world we live in, results don't come the way they did 20 years ago. It used to be that being good led to good results. But that's not the case anymore. Quite simply, think about Kodak. Kodak was a company that had the world really on a string. They could do whatever they wanted to. And then in about the 90s, actually, the original digital camera came about idea in the 70s. And they had an opportunity to get way ahead of the curve in the 80s and then decided not to. They completely and totally refused to change. They were convinced that their market wasn't going to change, and they decided to not go down that path. Kodak currently has less than 1% of the market share that it used to hold. And that's the way that most everything is going. I can give you example after example. Think about Uber in the taxi cab industry, or think about Airbnb. They have more market share now than the Hilton Hotel Group ever has, even at its peak. It's crazy. And that all has happened in the last 10 years. It's not really going to change. It's going to continue to be that disruptive. More change is taking place in a 5 or 10 year period now than it used to take in 100 years. I would assume that that's actually probably going to continue to accelerate. Being good, it's going to get you poor results. Being good at your job, it's going to get you poor pay. You're competing with so many people now. You're not just competing with people in a local geography. You're competing with people all over the world. You're competing with people's attention on the internet. You're competing with people who you've never even met before or you've never gone to school with. The world has gotten much smaller, and no matter what you do about it, the world is going to get more and more competitive. Being great is likely to get you good results, whereas great used to get you great results. Again, the market is becoming more and more saturated, so great is merely yielding good results. On top of that, most people, most employers, clubs, hotel groups, are getting more and more concerned about margin, especially with the idea of the minimum wage coming into play, where we're now going to be allocating more dollars to the lower end of our staff spectrum, and it's going to take away from the top end and the people who've spent the last 25 or 30 years in the field. And that's really a challenge. 20, 30 years ago, this was a completely different industry, and it's going to continue to get more and more different. Excellent will get you great results. The only way to get to excellent results is to truly be outstanding. Like I said, being good no longer gets good results. When it comes to change, most everybody has a reluctance, especially chefs and kitchens I grew up in. There is a reluctance to change. I, as a certified master chef, truly believe that there are some things that should never change. I don't think standards should ever go away. I think fundamentals will be fundamentals forever. I think they need to be honored, they need to be taken seriously, and they need to be passed on to the next generation. But with a reluctance to change, change actually becomes harder. The longer we wait to adapt, the harder it becomes to do so. Right? Think of that stone at the bottom, right? And that decision is your decision that you need to make. As time keeps going on, you keep stacking more stones on top of that. Think about the role of the chef in the 80s. Think about the role of the chef in the 90s. Think about the transition and the change that happened from the 80s to the 90s. And then think about the transition from the role of a chef in 2000 and then up to 2010, where human resources expectations went through the roof. No matter what, every year the expectations for what we do in our role and what we do in our life, they change. It becomes more advanced. Our roles become more demanding. No matter what you do, change is coming. We have a new generation of chefs coming. Service styles are changing due to last year. To go is a whole new facet that I think was mostly untapped for most people. And if you haven't gotten into to-go style service, I would say for most restaurants, you're probably not going to last very long, especially with opening or closing being on the fence right now. In the world we're in, I don't see a whole lot of room to not do that. That's a shame, and it makes things tricky, but I think it also speaks to necessity. We're talking about survival at some point, and I think this is one of those areas where we really need to look at survival and understand that in order to survive, we're going to have to change. We're going to have to adapt. And we should be in control of that change, by the way. We should be able to be in control of our adaptation. No matter what, equipment's going to change. More advanced equipment's coming online, and it's going to continue to do so. Some of it will probably be cooking itself. There's self-stirring kettles, pressure cookers. There's also the combi oven. If you're not familiar with the combi oven, I highly recommend you become acclimated with it, because soon enough, employers and operators are going to be searching out the use of these pieces of equipment because of the money that they save in time and labor, and how they reduce the risk for failure and for really poor operation. Expectations are definitely going to change as well. Think about the consumer perspective that changed in 2020 after COVID. I would say right after COVID hit, people were very understanding. People were just happy to get service. People were happy to interact. But as the year wore on, and after 9 months of people getting to go, they were a lot less forgiving about what they were getting in their to-go box. Those expectations changed. And now that we're in a whole new year and COVID has passed, well, I'm sorry, we're a year past in the era of COVID. Let's go that route with that. People are looking to get back to as normal as possible. They're looking for the finer end. It's not so much about survival for the consumer, for their expectations, and the expectations of our owners and operators, the people that we work for and the people that provide for us and pay our bills. Their expectations are raising as well, especially if they can get more for less money. Again, being good is going to lead very quickly to poor results. So the question is, are you guiding change, or is it guiding you? Let's ask the question, who am I? Just to make this nice and simple, I am a competitor, I'm an athlete, a coach, I'm an Olympian certified master chef, I'm the owner of Legit Concepts, husband, father, and all of these things. For each one of you, it's different. Put different lenses over your eyes. They change the way you see your world. And because of where I've been and what I've done, I see the world in a fairly unique way. It's put me in a unique situation to do what I do. So what do I do? Another question that I'm asked pretty frequently, so let's just get this out of the way. I'm a guide for chefs. You're the hero of your own story. I'm here, think of me, I don't want to be so bold as say, think of me as Obi-Wan, but my goal is to see more people be successful in their career, right? I have the knowledge, the strategies, and the formulas that I've developed over my 26 years in the field, and I develop people and chefs to become high performers. I build high performance chefs. So that's why we're here. That's what we're here to do today. So if you would, while we're on the subject, enter into the chat for me. Do you want to be a CEC? Are you looking to pass the Master Chef exam? Are you looking at being a competitor, Culinary Olympian? Do you just want to open your business back up? Just type it in the chat for me real quick, and let's just wake everybody up, get people moving around a little bit. Got to get that engagement, get everybody woken up, shake it out a little bit. Can't do jumping jacks in the middle of this. I don't think that'd be appropriate. Why I do it. This is the most important part, right? John Maxwell, he has a philosophy where he talks about building ladders, and I like to be a ladder builder. I like to help chefs build their ladders so that they can climb their way to success and get where they need to go. Time, energy, money, all of those are limited resources. Life is short, and I want people to learn what they need to learn in order to be successful. And figuring it out wastes tons of resources. Now, figuring it out for a young cook means something different than figure it out for a chef in the industry for 15 or 20 years. But if I can teach you something in 6 months that took me years over my career to figure out, that fulfills me. Quite honestly, that's why I charge, actually, because it's a combination, right? It's an investment in me and my time so that I can share what I've learned so that other people can learn and grow as well. It's an investment in me so I can invest in you. The question of the day, are you the hero of your circumstances, overcoming your obstacles? Are you avoiding them and becoming the victim of circumstance? So many chefs are finding themselves in that situation where no matter what you do, you're getting tumbled by the industry. I have a stat that's going to be coming up very soon here, but let's talk about our skill number 1, adaptation. March 2020, COVID lockdowns were introduced, right? For the first time ever, the economy gets slowed to a screaming halt, right? First time ever, I think any of us ever, I don't even really think anybody believed in March or April of last year that at this time, a little over a year later, most of the country would be wearing masks every day. We'd be talking about a mandatory vaccine. We'd have travel restrictions, and we would be in the situation that we are. I think everybody would have expected that business would have been continuing. Wow, what a change of events. Let's talk about a year full of change. And if you want to deny that change is coming, here's a phenomenal example of something nobody ever saw coming, and knocking everybody back on their heels, right? So what that means, excuse me. So now what that looks like in the grand scheme of things, right? Whether you know it or not, there's 15 million Americans that are employed in the hospitality industry. Those are registered employees. So that is only counting legally documented American employees. So that means that number is probably closer to 20 or 25. It wouldn't surprise me at all. And in addition to that, last year, 25% of hospitality businesses closed forever. That was a statistic that I pulled from, that was an early statistic, and I'm sure that that's still going to get updated. But think about that. That means that a quarter of those people that are now out of work. And I would say at some point, half of those 15 million Americans, maybe even 2/3 of those 15 million Americans, found themselves looking for a way to pay their bills. That's pretty frightening. I don't like being at the mercy of anybody else. I'm a big fan of controlling my life and controlling the way that I deal and I live and how I show up to the table, right? I want to be in control of my fate, and I want to take control of my future. Let's talk about the other side of that, right? There were a few operations. Actually, there's a good number of them, but a good example of the other side of things, instead of the shutdown and stop things from happening, we had Myers Park Country Club, which is located in North Carolina. They had this really cool process where right off the bat in mid-March, they met with the president. They spoke around with their culinary team. They met with the board, and they worked out a whole plan for basically rolling out a pandemic plan to make sure that they were keeping their employees on staff, right? They mitigated as much of the loss as humanly possible. They switched over to serving the members in their vehicles. They started rallying local vendors and businesses, serving farm boxes, and they really just right off the bat got out in front of curbside. And really, it was a big game changer for them. And in early conversations, because they did it so quickly, they were actually able to recoup some of the losses that they normally would have had, and actually did better for the months of April, May, and June than they would have otherwise, based on to-goes, farm boxes, and curbside. So right at the shutdown, they assessed their situation. The leadership created a clear vision. They tapped the team's experience. They made a dynamic pivot and maintained standards. Now, one of the things that I want to suggest is that in the midst of adaptation, the next skill that we're going to talk about is learning. There's a lot of these resources that are free. His playbook, Scott Craig built the playbook, but the playbook that he built is available for download in exactly how he did it, with minimal requests. I'm not sure at this point if it requires a subscription to Club and Resort Chef, but even if that's the case, what that could do for the business is pretty remarkable. If you can save your culinary team, or if you can continue to build it back with a whole new program, and his systems are really solid. I mention this because, again, it's a free resource, and if you're looking for resources, they're definitely out there. Financially, the team experienced minimal layoff and totally built a culture and member support, the likes of which they didn't have before that. They used that member satisfaction as a compass because it made the members happy and it allowed them to guide themselves. Tremendous financial benefit for the club. And then let's take another little sampling of another particular restaurant group that totally reinvented themselves through adaptation in order to survive. Look at Daniel Hume from 11 Madison Park in New York City, right? 3 Michelin star restaurant, one of the best, usually one of the best rated restaurants in the country year after year, completely switched their dining model and switched over to doing commissary meals for people who just needed food. They were feeding hundreds of meals a day to people who weren't paying at all. They developed the contract with the city and they were putting their team together and they were serving hundreds of people. Now they made conscious decisions to change the way they did everything. And because they adapted, they're actually thriving at this particular point, where there's restaurants that didn't, they're dying, they're not doing well. Restaurants like these that did adapt, that did come together and change the way that they approach their business, they're completely thriving and doing things that really may never have happened had the pandemic not occurred. So what's the moral of the story? Simple. It's adapt or die. Business really is unforgiving right at this particular point in time. It's the winter season for business. And in our current economy, there's no other way to put it. It's short. It's not sweet. And we've all had it really good for a very long time. So this feels pretty awful. I mean, I think we've all gotten very accustomed to things working. But now in order to keep what we have, it's going to take a lot of creativity, ingenuity, and self-induced growth in order to maintain. So here's a couple action items just on this particular topic, that some things that I would recommend, right? In order to grow your skills, to become more valuable, which I think overall is what my whole point is, build a personal brand. If you haven't already started to define your personal brand, do so, right? Everybody has an Instagram account, but who you are and why you do what you do is very important. In a club environment, in a hotel environment, in a restaurant environment, it's becoming increasingly more and more important. I know I had a conversation with Chef Rogers quite simply about the fact that he has to market and brand his culinary team in order for his team to stay in front of his members' eyes, and in order to stay relevant with a membership that might be removed or might be, I guess, becoming disheartened by the current conditions. Everybody's paying dues. What are they really seeing for it? When you brand yourself, you create a nice buffer for you and you create more value for yourself in the eyes of the people who employ you and in the eyes of the membership that supports you. So when it comes to staffing, when it comes to support, and when it comes to exposure, there's no better way than to create a personal brand. Next, work on being excellent, not just the good aspect of in your market, but become excellent in your market. Focus on the things that you can do and do them better. Be the best in your area, be the best in your class, and work on leveling up all things you do in order to get the fire back under your butt, get the fire back under your team's butt. And when you do this, it definitely has an impact when it comes to acquiring staff. Staff see it. That ties directly back to building a personal brand. When you bring more skills to the table, you have more to sell to a potential employee. And make no mistake, it's a very different market now employing staff than it used to be. If you're not marketing to your potential employees, you're probably not going to have them. I know master chefs that I never thought would ever have a challenge getting staff. Not able to get staff. It's what it is. If you're not marketing, you're not getting the people that you need. Develop new skills. And if you develop new skills that you need, then you're inevitably going to bring more value to the table. And that's a perfect segue into our next skill, which is skill number 2, learning. Now, everybody has heard this, and I'm sure everybody's tired of hearing, oh, I need to learn more. But it's more about how specifically you learn. We all have a limited amount of time, but what you're learning will change the trajectory of your current career and of the state of your business. Let's talk about it this way. How long have you been a chef? Take a minute and type that into the chat. We'll look at those in a few minutes here, but think about that for a second. How long have you been a chef? And let's have a reality check with that, right? Before the age of 25, you've got unlimited exposure to influence. You've got unlimited exposure to mentoring, constant exposure to teaching, and you are at or below the skill level of the people around you. It is incredibly easy for you to learn and for you to grow very rapidly. Everything looks like progress because everything is actually progress. Now, we fast forward 10 to 20 years later. Now it's all up to you. It's all on you. What you serve, what you cook, how it's cooked, and what it looks like. No matter what, unless you're incorporating ideas or focusing hard to learn and implement new skills, you're still you. What you're doing and who you are doesn't change. You're not in an environment now where you're being saturated with information. In some ways that's good because you need to have a style, you need to have a standard, and you need to be you. But at the same time, we're living in a world that's changing so quickly that there needs to be new approaches and there needs to be new connections made with your food or new connections made with your membership. And I'm not necessarily saying specifically that the food needs to change. I'm not saying that your food specifically needs to change, but how you communicate may need to change. How you communicate with your membership or your staff, what tools you're using in your kitchen, or what apps. Question I always love to share, I always enjoy asking and seeing what kind of feedback it is what kind of apps are you now using in your kitchen to help you manage your team or help you manage your recipes? How have you advanced using technology? Because there's a lot of tools out there that make life easier. Project management tools, prep list tools, scheduling tools. There's a lot of different tools out there that you could potentially incorporate. It's free to look. In a lot of cases, it takes a Google search, and you'd be surprised how much information you can come across. It's funny, but think about the Apple iPhone, or think about the iPhone. Think about how this little device changed the entire world. Think about how much access you have at the tip of your fingers. The rate of information and knowledge that every human has access to is truly almost infinite. You can Google almost anything. You don't actually have to know anything, and that makes things challenging. But at the same time, you can Google anything. If you're short on special ideas, you can look and see what the French Laundry's serving if they're open right now. Or you can look at any restaurant from the past, present, or future. You could download a book. You could look at the Epicurean. You could look at a PDF. There's really no limit to what you can truly look at. The amount of information is infinite. Now, here's a fun little fact, and I hope I hit home with this point, but there are currently more scientists alive right at this particular point in time than there have been in all of history, collectively speaking. And that's a point that I want to make to talk about how technology is going to continue to grow at an exponential rate and how we're going to continue seeing new tools and the world that we live in change at a very constant rate. The real problem isn't lack of knowledge. I think the real problem is that there's too much of it. It's hard to figure out and decide and determine what it is that you should spend your time doing. Your brain becomes overwhelmed. Success leaves clues, however. That's the most important part. You can focus on someone who's done good things, who's done great things, and who's had successes. And again, this is what led me to build my business. And think to yourself, who's someone that is where you want to be? Look to them and look at the strategies that they've used. Look at the people who've strategized their success for clues or have formulas, or think about the people that you would like to learn specific techniques from. If you're looking for modern approach or modern use of hydrocolloids, check out YouTube. There is a phenomenal section on YouTube with Ferran Adria and Jose Andreas doing work with hydrocolloids. And they film these videos at Harvard where they really put some significant research into it. They're free videos on YouTube. You don't have to pay anything for them. And I'll tell you, I'm sure the kids at the time that were there paid hundreds of thousands of dollars for their education in order to get those lessons. But they're on YouTube now. And simply there, all it requires is a little bit of search. So here's an example of a strategy, right? Raising the Bar is my online course, yes. So my simple formula and how this works, how this is going to get my people or get my students from point A to point B. We're going to spend some time in the course with assessment, figuring out where it is that you are. There's going to be teaching. Then we're going to build basically a personalized system with some of the strategies that I've used over my career. Going to implement that into real life, and then you're going to execute it in your day-to-day. For me, knowledge without integration is useless. And when you find yourself looking for information, try and find information that is spelled out to be clear, concise, and to the point. So you're not wasting time looking at things that really might not get you where you want to go. The flip side of that coin is never take advice from someone whose shoes you don't want to wear. Right? That's that's a dangerous path to go down. Does that make sense, or am I making sense? Have I lost anybody so far? I'm trying to squeeze quite a bit in here, so we're a little over halfway. Promise. Can talk. I know. All right. So when you think of all things as a muscle, everything can be strengthened, everything can be built. And that's something that really made a difference to me when I was getting ready for the Master Chef exam. Same thing with getting ready for the Culinary Olympic team, right? You don't have to have all the skills right at the beginning. It's not even realistic. Nobody actually does. And I think I wasted a lot of time thinking that people did. People had all those skills. They possessed them already. And, okay, well, how am I ever supposed to get skills that I wasn't born with? But everything is like a muscle. You can develop it if you practice and if you work on it. And that's where coaches, trainers, mentors come into play. They teach you how to exercise the muscle. If you want to get better at cooking classical cuisine, there's resources out there where you can reach out to, and you can get an understanding of classical cuisine that you're not going to get on your own. Same thing, if you've never stepped foot into a gym and you want to get nice big biceps, you can walk in and you can definitely work out, but the strategy is probably going to elude you for a while unless you spend 10 or 15 years doing the wrong things to figure it out. You don't have to. You can spend the money, you can hire a trainer, and you can get yourself on the right path. And you can have the outcome that you're looking for because people have done it, because the strategies exist. So remember that inputs produce the outcomes. And just like the ingredients that you start with, great ingredients going in produce great outcomes on the end, on the other side. So for learning, there's a couple action items, right? Attend free webinars. Congratulations. I'm really glad that we're here. I'm glad that we're talking. I'm glad that we're spending time together. But keep looking for stuff like this. There's tons of information out there. Do some YouTube searches. I'll tell you what, I wish I had the time to sit and just continually binge watch the Harvard videos on YouTube. And there's tons of other stuff there that's really solid. In fact, I actually started using YouTube to teach my cooks when I was the executive chef at the Ford Plantation. So I would use YouTube to train my cooks when I needed to because I didn't have the time or I didn't have the resources in order to train them effectively. So I would find a great video and I'd send them with homework at night. It helps, made my life easier. And quite honestly, it made me far more effective in my job. Highly recommend reading something outside of the industry. And this is part of the reason why I run the book challenge that I do on Instagram. And the idea is just to get ideas. And quite honestly, everybody who's in the book challenge, I've got a laundry list of books now that are pre-sorted, that chefs are telling me what's good, what's not, what not to waste my time on, and what books are great to read. So there's great books out there that can lead to new resources. And since a lot of us have more time on our hands than we used to, half an hour a day can get you through 10 or 15 pages. You can add a couple books to your library every year. Books I recommend other than cookbooks. Cookbooks are great, but Get business books. Get other books that talk about strategy and talk about the skills that, as chefs, I think a lot of us develop late in our career. The human resources skills, the soft skills, all of those are very relevant to our success, but not necessarily focused on or trained like the muscles that we need. Whether we want to or not, if we only exercise our arms, our legs are going to look really funny if we're not exercising those, whether we like to or not. If we don't have a strong core, we're still not going to be able to have the strength and to have the functional athleticism that we're going to need to be successful. It's the same thing with having soft skills and the ability to negotiate and communicate and have those crucial conversations. It's the name of one of my favorite books because it was the first time I was really introduced to the fact that, hey, everybody's uncomfortable by these conversations. And there's really some great tools to teach me how to do that. Learning can come from anywhere. Before I dive into topic number 3, I just want to talk about the Navy SEALs a touch. There's a quote that really I just completely live by at this point in my life, and I tell it to everybody who will listen. So congratulations, I'm going to tell it to you. The Navy SEALs, they believe that you don't rise to the occasion, you fall to the level of your training. Let that marinate for a second. We all talk about the best case scenario of us getting in stressful environments, and we all think that we're going to raise to some level that we have never previously seen before. It may happen, but 9 times out of 10, you're going to fall to the highest level of your training. Another way to say this is, Mike Tyson always says everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face, and in a lot of ways, changing what you do or changing work environments or pursuing a master chef exam or trying out for the Culinary Olympic team, competing for the first time. A lot of those things are kind of hits in the faces that force you down to your level of training. And if you don't have the level of training, you're not going to be successful in those endeavors. And I love the Navy SEALs because they're really high performers. They're great high performers. And I think they've got world-class systems. It's why I look to them to see what they do, see how they train, see how they prepare, so that they're going to be successful in the things that they do. Our lives on the line if we make a mistake? Not always. We can make mistakes that can cost people their lives, but I would say it's definitely an exception, not the rule. But if you're willing to learn from them, there's probably some really cool lessons that they have to teach, and that's just one example of the many that are out there. I grew up with my dad as a former Army drill sergeant, so military rings true with me. That's something that's through and through in my blood, really. And if that doesn't speak to you, then find something that does, but make sure that it's something that pushes you to grow and to control your outcome than to be pushed by your outcome, which is never really pleasant. Brings me to skill number 3 in our list, right? Growing. Life begins at the end of your comfort zone. And as you grow your knowledge, you grow the value you bring to the marketplace. Pretty simple. I have this conversation with young cooks very often, right? People want to talk about making more money. I imagine every single chef in this call has been asked by one of their staff to make more money. The easiest way to have that conversation for me is to talk about value. No, I'm not talking about their value as a human being. I'm talking about the value that they bring to my kitchen with their talent and their skill, right? What value do they bring to the marketplace? It's a pretty simple conversation. It's easy to point out flaws. It's easy to have a much more in-depth conversation when somebody's asking me for money about their shortcomings, to talk about the things that they do right, the things that they could do better. And usually when you tell them that improvement will bring them more money, they tend to hear that more than they would at any other time. There's still challenges. I know nothing's perfect. But no matter what, the growth that people experience, and this ties to the staff, will increase the value that they bring to the marketplace. This information is everywhere, and in our day and age, what's most important is how you filter it so that you can learn what applies to you and how you can implement it into your work. Can you be honest with yourself and find an area that you need to develop? I'm a chef. But in reality, I'm a guide and I'm a coach, and I had to develop those skills in order for me to be successful in the world that I am now. Let's take the exam, for example. There is no way on earth you can be successful at the CMC exam if you're not at that level of being a master chef day in and day out. There's just no way around it. You can't go to that test as anybody other than the master chef that you need to be to pass that test. You get 30 some ingredients on day 8, and especially in the evening, right? You literally have time to write a menu and to cook it. There's way too many variables, too much variety, and nothing at the exam is going to be comfortable. So if you're comfortable preparing for the exam, you're probably not going to be successful executing the exam. That's the comfort zone. That's the pain that needs to come while you're preparing. It's like going for a gold medal in competition. It takes everything. You think you've put everything into it, but it takes that little bit more to push you over the edge. It takes everything you've got and pushing you past your limit and getting yourself out of your comfort zone. Usually, in order to grow, you've got to push yourself to that point where you're a bit more uncomfortable than you normally are. Otherwise, you're just simply not growing. So far, everything, literally, that we've spoken about is ultimately about growing. In the natural order of things, if you're not growing, you're dying. Tim Ryan used to say that, if you're not getting better at something, you're getting worse. And it's really easy for us to do. And it's very hard in our current roles as executive chefs or as corporate chefs to continue to get good at all the things that we want to. We all started this field as cooks. We started down a path of being very, very good cooks. And a lot of us found ourselves in the role of a sous chef because we were good cooks. And then as the years go on, no matter what you do, you get further and further from the stove. But we all still want to continue to be great cooks. The challenge is there's a whole lot of other skills that we need to acquire in order for us to be successful and in order for us to maintain our positions. I had a phenomenal conversation with a couple of the recruiters in the industry because I'm writing an article for Club and Resort Chefs. But the average time frame that they expect a chef to be in their role is about 9 years. Because the club gets tired or the chef gets bored or the club gets bored with the chef. It's unfortunate, but that reality makes sense. So if you're not trying to change and if you're not trying to stay ahead of that curve, it's going to continue to catch you. And no matter what, it's happening regardless of how you feel about it. So take a moment and realize that real and lasting change comes from daily discipline, consistency. So whatever habits you have now, they're getting you the results that you want. And this gets me to my major action step for this particular point. Try a new habit, something pretty simple, right? Try a new habit that's going to change everything you do. One little tweak can change a lot of different things. Just start doing something differently for the better with the right reasons in mind. Something simple that you wanted to do for years, do it. Because your habits will tell me more about you than anything you could ever tell me. I always refer back to this quote. It comes up time and time again. Quite simply, there's just no way around the fact that you're going to fall to your level of training. And if you're not raising that level of training, then unfortunately, the people around you that are coming out of culinary school have deeper knowledge and they're less expensive. The chefs that are around have, deeper knowledge in a lot of cases. So again, if you're not growing, fortunately, the other side of that is going to nip you in the butt. There are many paths to growing. And if you think you don't need to, I understand that, but I just ask you to simply listen to me for a moment here. I want to make sure that the chefs who want more out of their careers and who want to make more than the average salary of 55 to 75,000 a year and want to achieve what you see as your own level of greatness, I want to make sure that I've got your attention. I want to make sure that I'm getting through, and I want to definitely offer some time at the end to answer questions and engage in conversation. Think about that. Growth is a mindset, and growing prevents stagnation. Displeasure comes when you stop growing. If you're growing, you're actually keeping yourself happy. If you're growing your team, if you're growing your income, if you're growing in your relationship, all of those things lead to some form of fulfillment. Because if you're not raising your standards start slipping in the wrong direction. And we are definitely a creature on this planet that once we've experienced something, going backwards is really unpleasant. Nobody likes to go back. Sometimes we have to, but nobody really likes to go back to the beginning. Nobody likes to experience what they've already grown out of. So I encourage you to continue to raise your standard and grow. So think for yourself, what does growth look like to you? And what is success to you? Whether that looks like security, happiness, becoming a master chef, competing, having the most successful year in your business, reopening, starting to go business, or buying a franchise, starting a new business, or trying out for the Culinary Olympic team. At the end of the day, you want to become a high-performance chef. You're trying to become a high performer and perform above that average. And I commend you on it. I say, yes, that's beautiful. Keep doing it. That's the way you should be. And that's the number one way that you can ensure your success in the future. Is something like that something you're looking for? Just make sure everybody's awake. Type yes in the chat. Let's do that. Just want to make sure nobody's sleeping on me. That's all. I mean, not that I know I've got a few cameras on. Thanks, John. All right. So if you want to know more of some of the things that I'm talking about, or if you want to hear me babble on more and more, you can go to geraldlford.thinkific.com. I'm going to show this again at the end. I just figured I'd leave that up for a second. I'm going to have a quick sip of water here. So if you miss it, don't worry about it. You can take a screenshot by hitting Shift, Command, and 3 on your keyboard. All right, and I'll be done in just a few more minutes. I think I have 9 slides left. Promise. The 3 skills you must possess in order to stay ahead of the curve for the up and coming year: adaptation, learning, growth. In this day, you above all are responsible for your success and your happiness. No one else is. No one else wants to be. It's not going to change. You have 2 paths ahead of you, no matter what, right? You can head down one path, which is kind of that path of staying where you are and not growing, because again, the world is changing, whether you're changing with it or not, and suffer the pain of regret from not adapting to the world around you. Or you can head down the other path, learn and grow to future-proof your life by gaining new skills, knowledge, and implementing it. It's really no other way to put it. You think about the chefs in the 90s who didn't adopt the human resources techniques that chefs needed to have in the early 2000s. A lot of them are still looking for jobs. They became consultants because there was no other path for them. That ball is rolling. That is going to snowball. This ball isn't going to stop. The world that we're in is not going to stop spinning. In fact, it's going to continue to spin faster and faster. Remember, mastery begins with clarity. One of my favorites from Marcus Aurelius: the only way out is through. The obstacle is the way. The hard thing to do is the thing that you must do in order to be better. And in my world, being a high-performance chef means asking for what you want and getting it. This is the outcome that I think every chef should have. This is the outcome that I want for everybody, and this is the outcome that I built for me. I want to be able to get what I want when I ask for it. I want the salary that I want when I ask for it, or the daily fee that I want when I ask for it. You have to learn to say no because there's so many offers, or there's so many projects that end up on your lap. I want you to have control over your life. I want you to be sought after. When you do these things, you become future-proof. I want you to fulfill your purpose, because if our work isn't fulfilling, then no matter what you do, it's always going to leave us feeling empty. There's few things more unfortunate than somebody at the end of their career who's made decent money and who's had a decent career, but not being fulfilled with what they've done. And as we start to get up into our 40s, I think we all come to that point where we either have a chance to ask ourselves if we're fulfilling our purpose, or we just look the other way and realize that maybe we're not exactly where we want to be, but we can't change our road. We can't change our path. But it's important to be fulfilled in the work that we do. And that's part of what being in the hospitality industry means to me. Take away from this that one idea implemented will change the trajectory of your life. If you want to know more from me about how to become a high-performance chef, I'm just going to steer you over to my website. Go over to geraldlford.thinkific.com, and I would love to open up for Q&A right now. Thank you all very much for listening. I really appreciate your time, and really, thank you.